We all trust that the world stays the same when we aren't looking. But what if you looked in the mirror and your reflection moved a second late? Or you stepped into a hotel hallway that simply never ended? Tonight, we share 3 accounts from people who fell through the cracks of our reality. Stay close. It's a long way down. My name is Sarah. I've spent the last 10 years of my life as a corporate lawyer in Seattle, a city that breathes through the constant rhythm of rain and steel. My world was defined by logic, billable hours, and the solid, unyielding reality of high-rise buildings. But last October, that reality didn't just bend, it broke. I was staying at a prestigious hotel downtown for a week-long conference. It was one of those modern glass and marble structures where everything is designed to look perfect and expensive. On the 3rd night, I returned late, exhausted from a 14-hour day. The lobby was silent, the air smelling faintly of expensive perfume and floor wax. I stepped into the elevator and pressed 4. As the elevator climbed, I felt a strange pressure in my ears, like I was ascending much higher than 4 floors. When the doors slid open, everything looked normal at first. The same beige wallpaper, the same patterned carpet, the same soft, recessed lighting. I stepped out, and the doors hissed shut behind me. My room was 412. I walked down the long corridor, my heels clicking softly on the fabric. I found the door, reached into my pocket for the keycard, and then I stopped. Next to room 412 was another door, also labeled 412. I frowned, thinking I had just misread the numbers in my fatigue. I turned around to go back to the elevator, but there was no elevator. Behind me was just a solid wall of beige wallpaper, seamlessly continuing as if the elevator had never existed. A cold, sharp panic began to bloom in my chest. I started walking in the only direction I could. Every 5 meters, there was a door. Every single one was labeled 412. I began to run. I ran for what felt like miles, the hallway stretching out infinitely before me. The air grew dry, tasting of ozone and old, stagnant carpet. The silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, pressing against my eardrums like I was deep underwater. I stopped in front of one of the doors, my hand trembling as I pressed my ear against the wood. I expected to hear a television or the hum of an air conditioner. Instead, I heard the sound of an ocean, a deep, thunderous roar of crashing waves, and a wind so cold I could feel it through the door. I realized then that I wasn't in a hotel anymore. I was in the uncanny valley of architecture, a place that looked like a hallway but functioned like a trap. Driven by a desperate impulse, I started screaming, but my voice didn't echo. It felt like the walls were drinking the sound. I saw a red fire exit sign ahead and sprinted toward it. I threw my weight against the heavy steel bar, expecting a concrete stairwell. Instead, I burst out into the freezing night air. I stumbled and fell, my hands hitting wet dirt and pine needles. I wasn't in downtown Seattle. I was standing in the middle of a dense, dark forest. The hotel was gone. There was no building behind me, just a wall of towering Douglas firs. I walked for 3 hours through the rain until I reached a highway. When the police picked me up, they told me I was 5 miles away from the hotel. I still had my plastic keycard in my hand. The hotel staff checked the security footage. They saw me enter the elevator on the ground floor, but the doors on the 4th floor never opened. To them, I had simply vanished into the shaft. I moved out of Seattle a month later. I live in a single-story house now. I haven't stepped into an elevator since that night, because every time I see a long, quiet hallway, I can still hear the sound of that impossible ocean behind the door. What Sarah experienced is what some call architectural predation. It's the idea that certain spaces, hotels, malls, transit hubs aren't just locations, but organisms. Sometimes they glitch. They open a door to a version of our world that isn't finished, a place where geometry doesn't apply. Sarah got out, but she left a piece of her sanity in that hallway. Next time you're in a hotel and the hallway feels just a little too long, maybe don't look for your room. Just turn back. My name is Marcus. In the late summer of 2012, I was driving a heavy-duty moving truck from the humidity of Texas to the dry heat of California. It was one of those brutal, soul-crushing stretches of the Arizona desert. A place where the horizon is nothing but jagged rock, heat haze, and a silence so profound it starts to feel heavy. By 3 a.m., that silence becomes something physical. It's a ringing void that presses against your temples, forcing your mind to invent sounds just to fill the emptiness. I was exhausted. My eyes were burning from the glare of the dashboard lights, and the hum of the engine had become a hypnotic drone. I was struggling to stay awake, so I started scanning the radio, hoping for a stray signal, a distant song, anything to tether me to the world of the living. The dial hissed with aggressive white noise, static popping like small dry bones breaking in the dark. Then I hit it. Frequency 99.0. In that part of the desert where even the strongest satellite signals go to die, this broadcast was impossibly clear. There was no hiss, no crackle. But it wasn't music, and it wasn't a talk show. It was the sound of a family dinner. I could hear the rhythmic, domestic clinking of silverware against ceramic plates. I heard the distinct jinkle of a dog's collar as it shook itself under a table. Then, the muffled, warm laughter of a mother, telling a story I couldn't quite catch. It was so intimate, so profoundly normal, that it felt like I was sitting right there in the room with them. It felt human in a way that made my skin crawl, because I knew there was no house for 50 miles in any direction. As I listened, the atmosphere of the broadcast shifted. The laughter didn't fade. It stopped instantly, as if cut by a knife. I heard the harsh, grating scrape of a heavy wooden chair across the floor. A man's voice, deep and strangely distorted, as if he were speaking through a layer of cold water, cut through the silence. He didn't speak to the people at the table. He spoke directly into the frequency. "Someone is listening to us from the other side," he whispered. The moment those words left the speakers, the world outside my windshield began to unravel. My headlights, which had been a standard warm halogen yellow, suddenly pulsed into a sickly glowing neon green. The asphalt road beneath the truck didn't just end, it dissolved into fine, white sand. Yet the truck didn't slow down. It kept moving at 70 miles per hour, gliding over the dunes as if the highway were still there, invisible to my eyes, but felt by the tires. I looked out the side window, and my heart seized in my chest. There, standing alone in the middle of the desolate, moonlit highway, was a house. It was a perfectly ordinary, 2-story suburban home with a white picket fence and a porch light that flickered with a rhythmic, heartbeat-like pulse. It stood directly in my path. I slammed on the brakes, but the pedal went flat to the floor with zero resistance. It was like stepping into a ghost. I braced for the impact, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white, screaming into the empty cabin. But there was no crash, no sound of twisting metal or breaking glass. Instead, I felt a sudden, violent drop in temperature. A rush of freezing air swept through the truck, smelling of ozone, wet rain, and oddly cooked meat. For a split second, the walls of the truck seemed to turn translucent. I saw them, the family from the radio. They were standing in their living room, frozen like wax figures. Their eyes were completely black, devoid of pupils or light, and every single one of them was staring directly at me as I passed through their reality. When I finally opened my eyes, the truck was back on the asphalt. The headlights were yellow again. The radio was dead silent. I pulled over to the shoulder, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I looked at the dashboard clock, expecting it to be 3:15. It was 7:15 a.m. The sun was already bleeding over the canyon walls. I had lost 4 hours in what felt like a heartbeat. My gas tank, which had been nearly full, was bone dry. The truck hadn't used that fuel to move through space. It had used it to power the bridge between two worlds that were never meant to touch. I never fixed that radio. I ripped it out of the dash with my bare hands and threw it into the depths of the canyon. Because sometimes, when the wind blows through the vents of the truck just right, I can still hear that father's voice, asking if I'm still listening. And I'm terrified that one day I'll answer him. What Marcus experienced is a classic frequency overlap. We like to think of our world as a solid, singular thing, but it's more like a radio. Most of the time, we are tuned into one station. But in the vast, empty spaces of the earth, the deserts, the deep oceans, the silent woods, the signal weakens. The insulation between here and there wears thin. That family wasn't a ghost story. They were a reality check. They were living their lives right on top of ours, separated only by a thin veil of vibration. The question is, if Marcus could hear them, what else can hear us? My name is Elias. I recently moved into a restored Victorian house in the historic district of Savannah, Georgia. It's a city built on top of its dead, a place where the humidity feels like a wet shroud, and every old house has a story it's trying to hide. I've always enjoyed the silence of old buildings, but this house had a silence that felt heavy, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for me to notice something. It started on a Tuesday morning, a day as ordinary as any other. I was standing in the master bathroom, brushing my teeth. The morning sun was filtering through the oak trees outside, casting dancing shadows on the tiled walls. I looked into the large, ornate mirror above the sink, a beautiful antique with a heavy silver frame that I found in the attic. As I spat into the sink, I caught a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. I looked up at my reflection, and my stomach did a slow, sickening somersault. My reflection was lagging. It was subtle at first. I would blink, and the me in the mirror would blink a fraction of a second later. I stood frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs. I lifted my right hand to touch my face. My physical hand moved instantly, but the hand in the glass followed with a distinct, deliberate delay. It was like watching a video with a bad connection, a glitch in the visual stream of my life. I stared at the eyes of my reflection. That's when the true horror set in. My reflection wasn't just slow. It was different. Its skin looked slightly paler, almost gray, and the eyes, they didn't have that spark of life. They were flat, like black glass. I stopped moving entirely, holding my breath, hoping it was just a trick of the light or a symptom of exhaustion. But as I stood perfectly still, the reflection kept moving. The Elias in the mirror tilted his head to the side, a movement I hadn't made. A slow, wide grin spread across his face, a smile that was too large for his mouth, revealing teeth that looked sharp and yellowed. Panic surged through me. I reached out, intending to smash the glass, but as my fingers touched the surface, I didn't feel the cold, hard resistance of a mirror. My hand went in. The surface felt like freezing, viscous water, thick and suffocating. The other Elias grabbed my wrist. His grip was like a vice made of frozen iron. Through the transparent rippling of the glass, I saw the bathroom behind him. It wasn't my clean, renovated home. It was a ruin. The walls were covered in black mold. Thick vines were snaking out of the cracked sink, and the ceiling had rotted away to reveal a sky the color of a fresh bruise. He started to pull. I felt my shoulder being dragged into the freezing membrane of the mirror. The strength of the reflection was immense, fueled by a desperate, starving energy. I could hear his voice now, not through my ears, but directly inside my skull, a wet, muffled sound like someone stepping through mud. "Let me in," he whispered. "It's so cold on this side." I screamed, a raw sound of pure terror, and threw my entire weight backward. I planted my feet against the vanity and kicked off with everything I had. My hand ripped free from his grasp with a sound like tearing wet paper. I fell onto the bathroom floor, gasping for air as the mirror began to vibrate with a low, violent hum. Without thinking, I grabbed a heavy brass candle holder from the counter and swung it with all my might. The antique glass shattered into 1,000 jagged diamonds. The hum stopped instantly. I sat there in the silence, my wrist bruised and glowing with a strange, pale mark where he had touched me. I didn't wait. I spent the rest of the day covering every single reflective surface in that house: mirrors, windows, even the polished toaster, with thick black sheets. I've lived here in the dark for 3 weeks now. I don't look at my phone screen when it's off. I don't look at the water in the sink, because last night I heard a sound that made my blood turn to ice. It was a faint, rhythmic scratching coming from behind the sheet on the wardrobe mirror. It wasn't random. It was the sound of something trying to find the exact spot where the glass used to be, trying to find the way back out. The mirror delay is one of the most terrifying forms of a reality glitch because it attacks your sense of self. We use mirrors to confirm that we exist, that we are here. But according to the theory of the gray void, mirrors are actually thin spots in our dimension membranes that separate us from a decaying, parallel version of our world. Elias didn't just see a delay. He saw a predator waiting for a synchronization error to switch places. If you ever feel like your reflection is watching you when you turn away, don't look back. Some gaps are better left unfilled. The fabric of our world is far thinner than we care to admit. Whether it's a hallway that shouldn't exist, a frequency from a house that isn't there, or a reflection that develops. A mind of its own, these glitches remind us that we are just guests in a reality we do and fully understand. The question isn't if it will happen to you, but when you'll notice the first crack. If you've ever experienced something that defies logic, don't keep it to yourself. Drop your story in the comments below. We read every single one, and your experience might be the focus of our next deep dive into the unknown. Before you go, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. In a world this unstable, you don't want to lose your way back to this channel. On the final screen, I'll show you 2 more videos to continue your journey into darkness. Stay alert, keep your eyes open, and whatever you do, don't trust the silence. See you in the next one.